Any event or incident taking place in the public eye is going to develop some level of conspiracy around it. Take the allegations that the semi-final of the 2002 World Cup was rigged in favour of South Korea and against Italy, only one of whom is playing in this year's competition, or the moon landings, or the fact that Epstein didn't. Eurovision is no exception to this rule, and just like everything else, these conspiracies are of variable truth and quality. Today, now that the 2026 contest is done, I'm going to go through a few of the most common ones that I've seen over the last few months, and either debunk or confirm them. Firstly, a quick word for today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. I've been traveling a lot during Eurovision season, and it was so helpful to be able to watch the same series on Netflix or wherever else as I have been doing at home, and access series that are available elsewhere but not in the UK. Each time we went abroad, I would enable it when we landed on my phone and just forget about it, leave it on the whole time, and use my phone as if I was sat back here at home. It was seamless and everything functioned as it should. With Surfshark, you can quickly switch between 4,500 servers in 140 countries, so you've always got a fast and reliable connection. And they're high speed as well, so you don't have to worry about buffering either. Eurovision has finally come to YouTube in the US now, but if you want to watch alt editions, you can do so using Surfshark VPN. You can also watch back any region-locked national finals as if you were in the country in question. Surfshark also has the added benefit of letting you use the internet without being legally required to hand your identity over to random private companies, and protects your activity online from their prying eyes as well as everyone else's. With data companies and corporations gathering as much data as they possibly can about us, Surfshark gives you peace of mind by blocking ads and trackers as well as keeping all of your web activity anonymous. I can't recommend Surfshark enough, and there is a 30-day money-back guarantee if you decide it's not for you, so there's no risk. Go to surfshark.com/ESCGabe or use code ESCGabe at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Now it's time for the conspiracies, and these swing from broadly plausible to total nonsense, and I'll assign a rating from 0 being complete nonsense to 10 being completely true based on my evaluation of it. I'll tell you right now, I don't think anyone is getting 10 out of 10. Let's start with a couple that are abstract assertions more than anything else. Starting with one of the most famous of all. The voting is just all political. This is interesting because it's more of a dismissal of the contest's legitimacy in general than a specific conspiracy theory, but it's still possibly the most common criticism of the contest that I hear. Very obviously, there are layers of truth to this. Azerbaijan and Armenia, almost without exception, will rank each other last in the juries. After Croatia's artist this year called out a joke that was made about them by the Israeli broadcaster that they felt was disrespectful, every Israeli juror ranked them last or second to last in the final. There are countless other examples of these kinds of behaviors, and there's some specific elephants in this room that we will come on to later. Obviously, we see some of these dynamics play out in the public voting as well. Where this one starts to run out of steam is when it reduces the reason that neighbouring countries vote for each other down to simply politics and nothing else. It's actually deeper than this. We could take some examples that disprove the theory and demonstrate why it's actually happening. Take Kai last year, who represented Sweden. They received 1/4 of their total points in the final from just the other Nordic countries: Iceland, Denmark, Norway, and Finland. And I'm letting Estonia in as well for this example. Congratulations, Estonia, you're finally Nordic. This song made sense in those countries for a few different reasons. Many of the cultural cues matched because this is the part of the world where sauna culture is so prominent, and people also will have made a connection through language. This is a song sung in Swedish, and when you hear it in Swedish, it is clever and it's charming. Danes, Icelanders, and Norwegians will have understood a lot of this, whether they've made an effort to learn Swedish or not, and there's a huge proportion of Finns who've either learned the language as a second language or speak it as their first language as well. If a song is in a language that you understand and is making cultural references that you understand, then of course it's more likely to appeal to you. You can apply this to the Balkans as well. If you're Croatian and hear a song sung in Montenegrin, you're going to understand it, and it's much more likely to share many of the same cultural features that you're familiar with. The other element of this is diaspora voting, where diaspora communities from one country vote for that country from somewhere else. A great example of this would be the UK and Ireland always voting for Lithuania. There is an element of country loyalty here, but again, it is partly the same cultural thing. If you are Lithuanian and you see something Lithuanian on television, you're much more likely to empathize it because it's in a language and in a cultural setting that you've known your entire life. Overall, I am going to give this one, that Eurovision voting is all political, a 6 out of 10 on the truth scale. There is a large amount of truth in the assertion that lots of the voting is influenced by politics. I've deliberately separated this from Israel-specific voting controversies because we're going to talk about them later, and because they're kind of a special case. They're not a feature of the contest more generally, but more a feature of the current political situation. This political voting in general is in small blocks that doesn't have massive consequences on the results. And the winner is still chosen predominantly on merit. That's why this only gets a middling score. Next up is a domestic special. Britain does badly at Eurovision because Europe hates us. This is essentially the national mantra of Britain when it comes to the Eurovision Song Contest. And it's hilarious because it's complete nonsense. You can trace this narrative back to 2003 when the UK came last with 0 points shortly after joining the US in the invasion of Iraq. It was openly and widely claimed at the time, including by the commentator for the UK at that point, Terry Wogan, that our 0 points was due to backlash against the invasion of Iraq. What was conveniently left out of that analysis was that our act that year, Gemini, were horrendously bad to the point of infamy and delivered one of the most out-of-tune performances in the history of the contest. They were variously conspiratorial in their response to this, making broad claims about not being able to hear the track or being sabotaged. The reality was they were just really bad, and that has been the problem ever since. Josh Dubovy with a Pete Waterman 80s B-side, Electro Velvet, Michael Rice, James Newman. What is it about any of these songs and artists that would inspire someone to vote for them? All of them were terrible. Even if we look at the 24 to 26 era of televoting shame, where we haven't scored a single point from the public, there were clear and demonstrable reasons why this happened in each case. Ollie Alexander's song was middling and unmemorable. Remember Monday didn't have something of particular coherence or of mass appeal, and Look Mum No Computer, who I have a massive soft spot for, just didn't have everything come together in the way I think we all hoped. When we do get it right, as we did in 22 with Sam Ryder, we achieve great results just like anyone else would. The same is true for Jade Ewan and Andrew Lloyd Webber in 2009. The thing is, we will never be consistently strong in this competition if we just blame everyone else every time we mess up. This one is getting a 0 out of 10 from me because there's no truth in it whatsoever, and quite frankly, British people at large need to stop throwing their toys out of the pram every time we mess up, because it's always our own fault. Let's move on, and you're going to start finding a theme in this video that a lot of these conspiracy theories have something to do with Israel. Israel is in the contest slash doing well slash whatever else because Moroccanoil is the event's sponsor. If you go under any comment section under any video related to Israel and Eurovision, it is a matter of time before you find a comment that says, well, look, the main sponsor of the event is Moroccanoil, and that's why Israel is still in the competition, that's why they do well. Let's take a closer look at this. Moroccanoil is a hair care company that has been the title sponsor of Eurovision since 2020. As part of this deal, they also do hair and makeup for all of the artists before they take to the stage. Presumably, as the title sponsor, they also contribute a very large amount of money to the competition. While they're now headquartered in New York, they were founded in Tel Aviv in 2003. And according to the company, many of their products are still manufactured in Israel. On the surface, the logic is pretty straightforward. Moroccanoil has big business ties in Israel, it sponsors Eurovision, therefore Eurovision is motivated to support or protect Israel. This completely misunderstands the contests, its decision-making processes, and how it's funded, so let's take this apart piece by piece. First, on the influence around decision-making. Eurovision is governed by the European Broadcasting Union, which is a broadly speaking democratic umbrella organization of public service broadcasters in Europe. Those broadcasters are able to participate in Eurovision, and there are also biannual general assemblies where they can vote on the direction of the organization at large. They can also choose to remove a member if they so choose, or to suspend them from specific functions of the EBU. Eurovision would be one such function. The thing is, while in theory these broadcasters could then remove Israel from the competition, the reality is they are all directly funded by the governments of their respective states, or have a funding model that is directly controlled by those governments. So in the case of the UK with the BBC, we pay the license fee, and the government has control over whether the license fee exists. The case pretty much universally is, whatever country you're in, your domestic government controls the taps of funding for your public broadcaster. They can turn those taps off anytime they like. In that position, especially given how frequent attacks on public service media have become in recent years, no broadcaster is ever going to go against the geopolitical position of their respective country, whether that's on Israel and Palestine or anything else. Germany is pro-Israel, so their broadcaster is pro-Israel. The same is true for Austria or Switzerland. Spain's government is very strongly anti-Israel and pro-Palestine, and therefore their broadcaster is as well. This, above all else, is the key driver of the political direction of the song contest. You can think of it as essentially holding up a mirror to the wider geopolitics of Europe. As long as the European geopolitical narrative at large is one that opposes a boycott of Israel, then no such boycott will find majority support in Eurovision either. This is also the reason why Russia was removed but Israel wasn't. There was broad consensus in Europe that Russia should be removed from cultural and sporting events. With the exception of maybe 2 or 3 days in September last year, I don't think there was ever a majority among the broadcasters in Eurovision to do the same for Israel. In my personal opinion, this is a double standard, and I've said this before, but that's the situation, and that's why we're in the position we are in. There is simply not the geopolitical consensus that we've seen on previous incidents. One thing is absolutely clear though, this decision-making process is operating at a political level that means that a wad of cash from Moroccanoil going to the EBU or not makes absolutely zero difference to the outcome. If Israel was removed and Moroccanoil chose to walk away, this would not be financially critical to the contest anyway. The EBU's finances are public to an extent, and Eurovision is actually not a profit-making enterprise, just as the public institutions that are in it are also not profit-making. It's tempting, it's convenient, and it's easy to try and transpose this corporate corruption, money and brown envelopes narrative, but this isn't FIFA, and the EBU and Eurovision is not a corporation. That kind of arrangement would have to pass through far too many hands in a decentralized organization like this, not to mention the fact that the Eurovision bubble is notoriously leaky and information would get out quick. As a general rule of thumb with these, if a conspiracy requires an enormous amount of people to not talk and never leak in order for it to work, it's probably not true. Overall though, this one is really important to debunk because it isn't just a silly conspiracy theory. It actively diverts attention away from what actually drives the EBU to make change in the contest. Eurovision will always move with Europe's geopolitics. So the geopolitics have to change if the contest is to change. As long as the current model of membership and participation exists, this will by far trump any and all other factors. Every minute we spend pointing the blame at distractions like Moroccanoil is a minute wasted in achieving the goal of Israel being removed from the contest. This one gets a 0 out of 10 from me. There's no truth in it whatsoever, and I really hope that people stop spreading it. Staying on a similar subject though, and one with a lot more truth to it, the next conspiracy theory is Israel has cheated at the Eurovision Song Contest. This is very interesting because Israel absolutely has manipulated the televote results, and this has been borne out over the last few years. In particular, the consistency of points received between 2024 and 2025 was so high as to be essentially statistically impossible. All of their 12s came from the same places in both years. Now we have a clearer picture of how Israel motivates this televote, and there has been some investigation showing that some measures have been quietly put in place in order to control it. As a result, here is my theory. There are two different things going on here, and the first is the big public one that we all see. The advertising campaigns where the Israeli government has spent millions telling people to vote the maximum number of times for Israel. And then, secondly, is a quieter, more targeted grassroots campaign. Regarding the ads, this is pretty simple. They weren't trying to persuade additional people to support Israel, and they weren't trying to persuade people who didn't like the song to pick up their phone and vote. Those weren't the audiences that they were targeting. This was a get out the vote operation, which is essentially what every political party does in the few weeks before an election. If you've ever noticed during an election campaign that the same political party contacts you over and over and over again as the voting day approaches, they're doing that for a reason. The data they have on you suggests that you are more likely than the average voter to potentially vote for that party. They're not trying to persuade you of anything, they just want you to show up. This works especially well if you're very passionate about that party or a cause they believe in, and if you're living in an area or in a competition where there is low turnout, as is the case with Eurovision. By blanketing the airwaves with this ads, many of the impressions are wasted on people who would never vote for Israel in the contest. But it also serves an important purpose, reminding a small but not insignificant wedge of people who are politically very pro-Israel both when to vote and what number to vote for, as well as how many times they can do it. In theory, this means people who are politically motivated to support Israel could vote for them in Eurovision without even having to watch the show. They're turning out their supporters like a political party would, and this distinguishes distinguishes their advertising from every other country. It's no wonder that this practice was significantly restricted in 2026. The second element, and quieter one, is the grassroots advocacy campaigns. This year, I published emails from 2 of these, calling on their small but extremely engaged memberships to vote for Israel, and they cited explicitly political reasons why people should do it. These organizations' memberships are much more likely to engage on something like this, because they've already made the active choice to support and often financially contribute to pro-Israel causes in their own countries. Many different countries use grassroots organizations like this to further their interests abroad in some way. For example, you can often find groups within political parties to this effect. In the UK Labour Party, you can find, for example, obviously Labour Friends of Israel, Labour Friends of Kosovo, Labour Friends of Palestine in the Middle East, Labour Friends of India, Labour Friends of Bangladesh, and so on and so forth. All of these different groups will have links with, and in various ways advocate and lobby for, and on behalf of, the interests of the countries in question. And the same is true across all different countries and all different politics, pretty much everywhere in Europe. To be clear, those organizations I've just cited, none of them have anything to do with this. I just wanted to demonstrate that lots of different countries have these kinds of advocacy networks that exist in lots of different places. The difference is only pro-Israel advocacy organizations have proven track records of explicitly political email campaigns like this in the context of Eurovision. Given that we know the number of people that vote isn't very high, and we have some published figures to this effect, you can move the dial a lot with a small number of very committed people who have already demonstrated they are willing to spend money to support Israel. The barrier to overcome to get them to vote is not very high. These effects combined produce the inflated Israeli televote scores that we've seen in the last few years. We've seen evidence that some action has been taken to mitigate it. Take Australia, where after winning the televote in 2024 and 2025, all of a sudden Israel came 20th this year. Or in the rest of the world vote, where Israel had won it at every time of asking since it was introduced in 2023, only to suddenly drop to 5th now. Beyond that, an ESE Insight investigation showed that despite them having worked in the semi-finals, prepaid cards were suddenly being rejected by Eurovision's voting systems during the final of Eurovision 2026. So we have some indications that the voting system is aware of common ways of manipulating and of inflating the vote, and clearly applies some kind of attenuating effect to these votes, or rejects them outright in the case of the prepaid cards. Obviously, Eurovision is never going to confirm what measures exactly are taken in order to safeguard the integrity of the voting system. In the past, the organisers have argued that not disclosing how it works is part of the security system, and for that reason I don't think we'll ever have clear details on this. But what is clear is something is going on, and there are clearly layers of protection that exist now. Overall though, to answer the question about this conspiracy theory, do these things, these campaigns and these adverts and so on, when taken together and given the reason behind them, do they count as cheating at the contest? I would argue, yes, it absolutely is. The mobilization of grassroots campaigns in particular is, in my view, egregious. And it's provable because, like you've seen, we have the emails to demonstrate it. For that reason, I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10. Yes, it is true. Israel does cheat at Eurovision. On a related note, the next one is kind of a spin-off of the same thing, just much more ridiculous. Bulgaria, Romania, and Moldova returned to the contest and did well with the televote because Israel paid for it. The top 4 in the televote this year at the contest were Bulgaria, Romania, Israel, allegedly, and Moldova. This is the 3 countries that returned to the contest this year, plus Israel, with the theory going that Israel has paid or otherwise secured their return to the contests and then ensured they get a great result from the voting. They have done this because of unclear reasons. I actually haven't seen anyone who's given me a good answer about why this would be in any way beneficial to Israel, but whatever. This has also been variously connected to a few other things, such as the fact that the money for the national selection of these countries must have come from somewhere, and therefore Israel must have paid for it, or that it had something to do with Moroccanoil because they were the sponsors of the selection in Romania. I want people to think about this for a minute. Firstly, Bulgaria cleaned up with the public and the jury. It was our first consensus winner in almost a decade, and it ended up way ahead of everyone basically everywhere in Europe. In most countries, they finished ahead of Israel, as did Romania. Secondly, do you really think that any of those 3 televote scores for Moldova, Romania, and Bulgaria were undeserved or unexpected? Romania and Moldova were always going to do well because they had a diaspora that was extremely active, and they had songs that were resonating with the audience. Moldova landslid the audience poll in its semi-final, for example. As for Bulgaria, to be frank, that performance was just a class above everyone else. and it was a deserved winner. The reality is this: the EBU did offer good terms for these countries to return, and we know this because the Romanian broadcaster said as much in their press release. Moldova's national final budget was the same as before. They just brought in local sponsors. The Bulgarian national final was heavily supported by the country's recording industry, who assisted both in artist procurement and in funding of the show, I believe. As well as that, before they withdrew, Bulgaria was a powerhouse between 2016 and 2021. The songs and the performances were just good, the bookies' favourites underperformed, and as a result, Europe just chose to vote for these songs. On the flip side, think about what it would have taken for this to be true. You would need a large-scale conspiracy to ensure the right points and the right votes in the right places for all of these songs in just the right amounts. That's the kind of logistics that requires a lot of people. Think about the methods we laid out earlier through which Israel manipulates the vote. All of the things that hold up, whether it's the political allegiances, the activation of already existing supporters, and so on and so forth, would immediately collapse if you told those people to vote for literally anyone else other than Israel. Vote for Romania, Bulgaria, and Moldova to somehow, in abstract ways, support Israel. This makes no sense. I've also seen the argument that this is to give plausible deniability to Israel's own televote score, but their campaign operates brazenly and openly. They have absolutely no reason to try and give themselves plausible deniability. This gets a 0 out of 10 from me in terms of its truth levels. It's just complete nonsense, it makes no sense, and it doesn't have any clear logic in terms of what benefit Israel would even get from this. On that same subject, the next theory is a double header, and I apologize because you can probably hear I'm losing my voice in real time while doing this video. I've been ill for weeks, basically. I'm sorry. Anyway, Bulgaria's victory at Eurovision this year was a secret Israeli/Russian psyop to either control the contest or score some kind of propaganda victory. This one is two things, the first of which is an extension of what we just talked about. The idea that Israel made it so Bulgaria would win and they would finish second because this benefits them publicly somehow. Let me emphasize again, Israel is not trying to finish second. Israel is trying to win the contest, and they've shown they will go to any lengths in order to do that. Secondly, let's again just walk through this logic for a second. Israel ensures Bulgaria wins Eurovision, and then Bulgaria hosts it. Okay, so how is Israel benefiting from it being in Bulgaria any more than if it was hosted in any other country? The benefits of participating in the contest are baked in for Israel, whether the show is in Bulgaria, Belgium, or Bhutan, and they would have been slated to participate in 2027 no matter who had won. The benefits of winning the contest are far, far greater, and that is why that is Israel's ultimate goal. If you can tell me what Israel gains by specifically ensuring that Bulgaria wins, then I am all ears. This has no logic and no evidence. The second, which is the Russian half, is a claim from Philip Kirkorov, a Russian artist, former Eurovision participant and longtime associate of one of the songwriters of Dara's song Bangaranga, Dimitris Kontopoulos. He has repeatedly claimed on Instagram that he was heavily involved with the song and with Bulgaria's participation at the contest, to the point of posting an AI-generated Trojan horse with the Russian flag behind it. I don't need to debunk this because Dara has already done it. Underneath a second post where Kirkorov explained his involvement in more depth, she pretty conclusively slapped him down. Kirkorov has a history of unwelcome interventions in the contest, so I doubt this is the last we've heard of him. In any case, this one gets a 0 out of 10 for truth as well. Next up, we have the juries are somehow corrupt or voting unfairly. There is plenty of evidence to suggest that there is some truth in this. Chief amongst those is the uncovered conspiracy in 2022 across several delegations in one of the semi-finals, which resulted in them all being caught and having their votes dismissed. That scandal led to juries being removed from the semi-finals altogether for the following 3 years. On a lower level, we have examples of consistent under or overscoring of specific countries by specific other ones. Greece and Cyprus are the prime example of this. And then on the other end, Armenia and Azerbaijan won't touch each other with a 10-foot pole. This also applies in some cases to artists that are descended from people in those countries. In 2017, Azerbaijan put Cyprus last, only ahead of Armenia because the artist was of Armenian descent. There are other contemporary examples of this corruption as well. For example, the Moldovan broadcaster's director general resigned after his country only gave Romania 3 points. Logistically speaking, given that we have several examples of this conspiring and backroom deals that have made it to the public eye, it's not unreasonable to think that on a smaller scale, these kinds of things do pass undetected. If it took something that involved 6 countries for it to be flagged, flagged. What's to say that individual nations haven't agreed to swap 12s with one other nation? In theory, you just need a very small group of jurors to agree to play ball. And given that many jurors have professional connections to the broadcaster for which they're working on that night, it's easy to see how they wouldn't want to jeopardize that and may agree to go along with things they wouldn't normally agree to. More widely though, there's very limited evidence of this happening on a more systematic scale. This is because, like I said, as a conspiracy like this grows, it becomes more and more difficult to hide. There are now 7 jurors per country, which means if you wanted to secure, say, 240 points from the juries, as an absolute minimum, you would need 140 people to be in on the plan. At that point, the likelihood of somebody blowing the whistle is essentially 100%. The other charge that has been leveled related to this is that Ukraine and Israel are being pushed down by the juries in order to prevent them from winning, given the complications that would come from one of them winning of very different natures. It's difficult to quantify this, but particularly in the case of Israel in 2024 and 2025, there was some limited evidence of this. Their songs were ranked last by jurors in those 2 years more than anybody else. Overall though, I think the poor running order spots that both of these countries have received in recent years are more to blame than any kind of secret political agenda amongst individual jurors. Overall, yes, there is low-level corruption probably that's flying under the radar, and jurors' individual beliefs are either consciously or unconsciously biasing them towards and against certain countries. That said, there's no grand conspiracy here, and for that reason, I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. We're closing with a double dosage of Italian chaos, provided my voice hangs on for just a few more minutes. These are classic ones from a few years back. Firstly, someone at the broadcaster in Italy published the Italian televote result in 2024 in the semi-finals to raise the alarm that Israel was going to do very well. This is a classic, and for those of you who don't remember, at the end of the semi-final, the exact percentages of the Italian televote were erroneously displayed on screen during the credits of the semi-final. They showed that Israel had not just won, they had won by a mile. The broadcaster then claimed that these were partial results and that they were inaccurate, but post-contest we've seen that they very closely matched what actually happened. The question has always been, how did this happen? Was it a procedural error, or was somebody somewhere deliberately making this error in order to raise the alarm that the contest was sleepwalking into a crisis that it was totally unprepared for? Let's think about this. In Italy, it's the law that at the end of any program with public voting, the full voting data is displayed on screen. This is obviously not the case with the Eurovision semi-finals, but typically it's shown after the final. The question is then, how did this voting get from the people who control it to the people who are responsible for putting graphics on the screen? This is unfortunately still a mystery, but in my opinion, it was probably just an accident. This is what is done for every single other show with voting in Italy, so it probably just happened out of habit, and by the time someone realized they weren't meant to do it, it was already too late. At the same time, I think it did focus a lot of minds. It totally changed the narrative around the competition that year, and I think it had a material effect on the final result. So even if it wasn't deliberate, it was certainly impactful. We can't rule out that this was a series of mistakes that were made on purpose, or that it happened out of shock and people were therefore not following the procedures they were meant to. For that reason, I'm rating it a 3 out of 10. I just have a sneaking suspicion someone somewhere did something they weren't meant to. Finally, staying with Italy, Damiano David did a line of coke off the table at Eurovision in 2021. No, he didn't. He even took a drug test. It's been 5 years, and I still see people spread this sometimes. With that, we're coming for a close for today, and my voice is packing in. This was fun to put together, and I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because there is no off-season on this channel, and we're actually not all that far away from covering the first ever Eurovision Asia. For now, thank you for watching. I'm going to go have a ginger lemon tea, and I'll see you again very, very soon.